I heard it with my own ears. I was behind the door, looking for my medication that had gone missing again. Then I heard her voice laughing. Let her suffer. She'll learn eventually. My heart froze. I never thought someone in the family could act like that. But I stayed silent, because what God did afterward, right in front of everyone, revealed who truly needed compassion, and who would learn the hard way what cruelty costs. My name is Hilda. I'm 74 years old and I can still remember the smell of the coffee my husband made every morning. After he passed, the house became too big, too cold, too quiet for me. My son Matthew insisted I move into his place, saying it would be temporary. When I arrived, I saw boxes piled up, laughter coming from the living room, and Lauren hugging me with a rehearsed smile. I believed I'd find some peace there, a little corner to grieve without being a burden. But within the first few weeks, I started to notice something strange in the way Lauren looked at me. A quick, sharp glance like someone sizing up a piece of furniture that doesn't match the room. She would say things like, "Don't worry, this is your home too," while fluffing pillows in a hurry. I tried to stay out of the way, walked slowly, took up as little space as possible, always asked before using anything. Matthew was always busy, rushing down the hallway, kissing my forehead on his way out to work. Lauren filled the house with scented candles, soft music, and guests who barely acknowledged me. I'd clear the table, take the dishes, offer to help, but she always said I got it with a tone that claimed the space. That word came out firm, like a boundary being drawn. That's when I realized I wasn't really welcome, just tolerated. One morning, as I was hanging clothes in the yard, Lauren walked by dragging a chair. The noise echoed loud like a warning, and she pretended not to see me while scrolling through her phone. The breeze carried the scent of detergent, and for a moment, I missed my old wooden clothesline. I used to think old age would bring peace, but in that house, I felt like I was walking on glass. Every move I made was watched, measured, judged as if I was an inconvenience. And me, trying to be a mother, a mother-in-law, and a guest all at once, kept shrinking a little more each day. Without knowing that was just the beginning. Sometimes I'd see Matthew in the hallway and say, "I'm fine, son." He'd smile, not seeing the exhaustion in me, choosing to believe what was easier. I respected their marriage, their space, even the hostile silence Lauren built around me. But something inside me stirred, a quiet little warning, a sign that a storm was coming before the calm I longed for. The house felt different when Lauren was around, and I stayed on alert, even when I tried to relax. One rainy night, lying in the small room next to the laundry, I heard muffled laughter. It wasn't mean laughter, just distant, like I didn't belong in the same home. I closed my eyes and pictured my husband adjusting his glasses, saying, "Hilda, be strong." That word always lit something in me, even when fear stood at the door. I took a deep breath, trying to believe it was just part of adjusting. But the truth is, my heart already knew something was about to change. And I had to be ready, even if I didn't understand for what. In the beginning, Lauren used to call me Mom with a sweet, almost musical voice. She'd make mint tea, place the cup gently on the table, and say, "I like having you here." I'd smile, pull the blanket over my lap, and think maybe God had given me a second family. The days felt light, filled with small conversations and kind gestures around the house. Matthew seemed happy, and I wanted to contribute to that harmony. I washed dishes slowly, kept everything tidy, avoiding any trouble. But while I was putting down roots, Lauren was slowly pulling them out. One morning during breakfast, I noticed she didn't say a word to me. She just set her mug in the sink and walked out of the kitchen without looking back. The next day, she did the same, but with her jaw clenched like she couldn't wait to leave. When I asked if something was wrong, she answered, "I'm busy," in a tone that cut through me. That cold, sharp voice made me grip the cup tighter, and my body reacted before my mind could catch up. Something in her had changed, and I needed to figure out when. Guests started leaving sooner when I was in the living room. Lauren would glance at my cane and sigh like she was looking at a problem with no fix. Once, as I was wiping the counter, she gently took the rag from my hand with forced kindness. "Sit down, Mom. I'll handle it," she said without meeting my eyes. But that sit down felt more like, "Don't touch my..." It wasn't what she said. It was how she said it. Like my presence was disturbing the balance she worked so hard to keep. One afternoon, while folding towels, I remembered the first lunch I made for them. Lauren had complimented my cooking and said I was a blessing. Matthew took a photo of us laughing together on the porch. Remembering that moment made my chest tighten because it felt like another life. The Lauren I knew back then walked through the house with light steps and music in her smile. Now, every time I tried to get closer, she stepped further away. Like I had crossed some invisible line. One small detail changed everything. Her smiles didn't last anymore. They flickered out quickly, like burned-out bulbs. She'd reply with, "Yeah, sure," without lifting her head from her phone. Sometimes she didn't even notice when I entered the room. I kept my voice low, my steps soft, trying not to intrude. But the air around her would tighten when I was near, and that tension followed me like a shadow. It was in that shift from sweet to distant that I started to feel something was off. Nothing happened all at once. Just thin slices of coldness, little by little. What used to feel warm became stiff, calculated, hollow. And me, trying to understand, watched closely like reading a hard-to-follow book. But I still had no idea what was truly behind it all, or how dark things would get. A darkness I'd only see when my medications started to disappear. I always kept my pills in the same blue box in the kitchen cabinet. It was an old habit, almost a ritual, from before my husband passed. High blood pressure, joint pain, a heart that skipped now and then, all managed by daily pills. I organized them carefully, sorted by time, marked with dates in my shaky handwriting. But one day, I opened the box and noticed one bottle was missing. I stood there, holding the empty space in my hand, trying to make sense of it, and a chill crept up my spine. I thought maybe I left it somewhere else and searched the house. Knitstand, drawers, even the purse I rarely use. Nothing. At dinner, I mentioned it casually, "One of my pills is missing." Lauren raised an eyebrow and gave a short laugh. "Mom, sometimes you get things mixed up." Matthew didn't notice the tension, too busy on his phone. And I, with a fragile smile, let the topic go. In the days that followed, more pills went missing. One here, another there, always just enough to plant doubt. I wrote everything down, watching for patterns like a puzzle. Each morning, I counted them carefully, breathing slow so I wouldn't mess up. But the numbers didn't add up. Someone was tampering with them. And that feeling of being deceived clung to my chest. When I finally asked Lauren about it, she was walking down the hallway spraying perfume. "Have you seen my pills?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She didn't even turn all the way. "Maybe you're doubling your doses without realizing." Her words hit hard. I forced a smile, but my hands trembled. She noticed and smirked, just for a second. That's when I first tasted the bitterness of suspicion. That night, lying in bed, I remembered my mother carefully locking up her own pills. She used to say, "Pills are life, Hilda. Never run out." Her words echoed in the dark while the clock ticked slowly. I hugged my blanket close, trying to stay calm. Something was wrong, very wrong, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. The house, once welcoming, now seemed to hide things in the corners. And every shadow felt like it was watching me. I promised myself I'd stay alert. I woke up early, went to the kitchen, and hovered near the cabinet pretending to organize things. Lauren walked by quickly, opened the cabinet, closed it again, didn't say a word. But I caught the flicker in her expression when she saw the box full, untouched, guarded. She left without speaking, her citrusy perfume lingering behind. And my heart, tight in my chest, understood this wasn't forgetfulness. It was deliberate. After that day, every time I brought up the pills, Lauren had a new excuse. "Mom, maybe you counted wrong, maybe you mixed up the days, maybe it fell behind the cabinet." The words were gentle but sharp, always paired with that look that questioned my memory. I tried to answer calmly, but inside I felt something breaking slowly. It was like she wanted me to doubt myself. And that hurt more than the missing pills. One day, holding another half-empty bottle, I went to the living room where she was folding laundry. "Lauren, this was full last week," I said, quietly but firmly. She didn't even look up from the pile of shirts. "Hilda, age plays tricks on us." The way she said age felt like a push disguised as care. My face grew warm as I clutched the bottle. This wasn't forgetfulness. It was manipulation. But I still had no proof. Trying to shake off the feeling, I went for a walk in the yard. The sun was weak behind the clouds, and the smell of damp leaves brought back an old memory. Me, still young, taking care of my sick mother, organizing her medication. I promised I'd never let anyone treat my health with disrespect. And yet there I was, being treated like I couldn't take care of myself. The wind blew through my hair and stirred a quiet courage inside me. I needed to open my eyes, no matter how much it hurt. That evening, Matthew came home exhausted and dropped his backpack on the chair. "Son, can we talk for a minute?" I asked. He smiled but was already heading for the shower. "Later, Mom, I'm wiped out." Lauren watched the moment with her arms crossed, fully aware of how little he noticed. I stood in the doorway, feeling the gap between me and my own son growing wider. The word mom left his mouth, but it had no weight, no attention, and that kind of wound cuts slow. Later, while setting the table, I accidentally dropped a glass. The crash echoed through the house, and Lauren showed up in the doorway. "Careful, Hilda," she said. "See, you're getting way too distracted lately." She grabbed the broom while I tried to pick up the pieces with shaking hands. I'll do it," she said, but there was no kindness in it, only judgment. And every shard on the floor felt like a reflection of my own fragility. That night I lay in bed, unable to close my eyes. The distant sound of the washing machine felt like a steady reminder of a house that wasn't mine. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and decided that from now on, I'd write everything down. Every pill, every change, every suspicious gesture. If no one believed me, I'd believe myself. I wouldn't let myself be erased while I was still breathing. And that quiet decision would change everything in the days ahead. That afternoon, I woke up dizzy, like the floor was moving beneath me. I held the wall and made my way to the kitchen, my heart pounding out of rhythm. I opened the cabinet slowly, expecting to find the blue box full like always. But when I lifted the lid, a cold silence fell over me. It was completely empty. Not one bottle, missing all of them. I stood there holding the box in both hands like it was fragile evidence. And the tightness in my chest was a clear sign of danger. I took a deep breath and started searching the house, my steps growing slower. I checked drawers in the living room, behind picture frames, even inside the fruit bowl. None of it made sense. It felt planned, deliberate. I tried to stay calm, but my trembling hands gave me away. I walked down the hallway, past the closed doors, feeling the heavy air shift. Every step echoed louder than it should. I was alone in that search, and I knew it. In the bathroom, I opened the family medicine cabinet, even knowing they wouldn't be there. I dug through bottles, boxes, folded towels, hoping for some clue. The mirror showed my pale face, sunken eyes, short breath, a cruel reflection of the worry I'd been hiding for days. I pressed my cold hand to my face, trying to steady myself, but the weight of the unknown only grew heavier, and the house felt like it was watching me unravel. I opened the cleaning closet and pushed past brooms, mops, boxes of detergent. Nothing. The feeling of being sabotaged hung in the air like a strong smell. A chill crawled up my neck, and I had to lean on the washing machine. The sound of the drum spinning reminded me of my racing heartbeat. I blinked slowly, trying to gather my thoughts, but everything was scrambled. The lack of medicine was starting to cause real symptoms, and it made me feel far too vulnerable. Back in the kitchen, I stared at the empty cabinet like it was an enemy. The bright light felt colder, harsher against the metal hinge. I shut the door slowly, trying to stay in control of my movements. But a wave of weakness climbed through my legs, and I had to sit down. The chair creaked beneath me, and my fingers gripped the edge of the table. I needed to find some kind of explanation, anything. But inside, my suspicion already had a name. I stood up slowly and walked toward the back of the house. The hallway felt narrower, the air denser, like the house itself was holding its breath. I pushed through the light curtain and stepped near the laundry room, where the light always flickered. And before I even opened the door fully, I heard voices. Voices that made me freeze. Voices I never expected to hear in that tone. That was the moment the truth started to rip through the silence. I stopped in the doorway, my whole body tense, one hand still holding the curtain. Lauren's voice came through clear, angry, laced with disgust. "She lives off pills," she said, scoffing like I was an unbearable burden. There was a short pause followed by a weak laugh. "1 hour without them won't kill her. Let the old woman suffer." The words hit me like cold water, pouring down my entire body. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Her phone echoed slightly in the laundry room, making each cruel syllable louder. The washing machine hummed behind her, but even that steady noise couldn't drown out her words. I stepped back, the cold floor beneath me, my heart stumbling in my chest. My vision blurred for a moment, like the world was shrinking around me. She kept talking, laughing, like she was commenting on the weather. Like my pain was something funny. And that pierced a part of me I thought had already gone numb. A memory came rushing back. My husband holding my hand in the hospital saying, "Hilda, you're strong." I felt his touch again, a comfort that no longer existed. And that memory is what kept me from collapsing right there. I leaned against the wall, breathed deep, and stayed silent. My body felt heavy and light at the same time, like it wasn't mine. I didn't want Lauren to know I had hurt her. I needed to think fast. When she hung up, I heard her steps moving toward the door. I backed away quietly, walking down the hallway before she could see me. The sound of her slippers sliding across the floor echoed behind me. I turned quickly and went into my room, closing the door gently. My chest rose and fell at a pace I couldn't control. I sat on the bed, gripping the blanket tight, and the silence in that room cut deep. The tears came without warning, but they made no sound. They ran hot down my cheeks as I tried to stay composed. It wasn't just sadness. It was the sting of betrayal, of being dehumanized. Being called old didn't hurt, but let her suffer opened a wound that burned. I was shaking, not from fear, but from disbelief. I never thought someone could wish pain on me like that. And in that moment, I learned loneliness has a sound and it's deafening. I lay down, too weak to move, staring at the ceiling that felt too far away. The darkness in the room stretched shadows along the walls. I pulled the blanket up to my chest, like I used to as a child when the world felt too big. My body still echoed with that sentence, over and over. Let the old woman suffer. I closed my eyes, searching for some peace inside. But all I found was the certainty that things were going to get worse. I returned to my room like I was carrying a glass about to shatter. Closed the door slowly, careful not to let the knob click, trying not to be noticed. The air felt colder in there, like the words I heard had frozen everything. I sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on my knees, trying to breathe evenly. But my hands were shaking too much. The tears started falling before I even realized, and none of them made a sound. I looked at my aging hands, remembering how many times they had cared for others. Cared for little Matthew with a high fever, holding his fragile body close. Cared for my husband, giving his pills on time, jotting down every detail. Even cared for Lauren when she lost her job and spent weeks in a fog. And now these hands trembled because of fear caused by the one I had welcomed in. The irony cut deep, and that quiet pain became my companion. I lay down slowly, adjusting the pillow with the same careful habit. The ceiling stretched above me, painted in shadows that danced with my breathing. The house noises, the fridge, the wind, a car in the distance all sounded muffled and far away. Like I was sealed inside thick glass, cut off from everything. Lauren's words repeated in my head, always the same, always cold. Let the old woman suffer, and the repetition became a form of torture. I tried to get up to drink some water, but my legs didn't respond at first. I held onto the dresser, breathing deep until my body followed my will. Each step reminded me that my medicine was gone, and that deepened the feeling of vulnerability I kept trying to hide. I wiped my face, feeling the heat of dried tears. My reflection in the mirror looked smaller, more fragile, and still there was something stubborn in my eyes. I got back in bed, pulling the covers up and down in a mindless rhythm. I blinked slowly, trying to push away the image of Lauren on the phone. I tried to figure out what I had done to deserve such contempt. But the more I tried, the less sense it made. It wasn't about me. It was something inside her, something dark, hidden, without limits. And I realized that too late. When I finally closed my eyes, a single tear slid down to my ear. My whole body curled inward, a natural defense. I thought about telling Matthew everything, but the memory of his distracted face stopped me. He wouldn't see. He wouldn't hear. Not yet. So I chose silence for that night. Tomorrow I'd face the truth more clearly. If God gave me strength, then I knew He would. When the house finally fell quiet, I stared at the slightly open window. The curtain moved gently, letting in a cold breeze that touched my face. I closed my eyes and felt the weight of loneliness settle, but there was still a thread of courage in my chest. I knelt beside the bed, my knees aching in protest. My hands folded slowly, grounding me in the moment. And for the first time in a long while, the words came easily. I needed to pray. Lord, give me wisdom, I whispered, my voice barely reaching the air. I asked Him to help me stay soft, even after so much injustice. I asked for clarity to know what to do next. And above all, I asked for justice, not revenge. I just wanted the truth to come out, clear and impossible to hide. My eyes burned as I spoke, but my heart felt like it was rearranging itself. As I prayed, I remembered an old episode, me still young, lost in a crowded hospital. A nurse held my hand and said, "Calm saves." Those words came back vividly, as if whispered in my ear again. My breathing slowed, and my chest made space for a little peace. Even afraid, I felt something greater watching me with care. A care that didn't come from Matthew or from Lauren, but from above. Kneeling there, I felt a strange force move through my spine. It wasn't physical, it was certainty. The certainty that I wasn't being ignored by the heavens. The certainty that my suffering wouldn't go unnoticed. The certainty that my dignity wouldn't be stripped away so easily. I stood up slowly, holding on to the edge of the bed. A different calm settled over me. I lay back down, but this time my chest felt less tight. The room was still dark, but not as threatening as before. I heard the house breathing, but I wasn't afraid of it anymore. I blinked a few times, letting my body slowly relax. And before falling asleep, I thought only, the truth finds a way. It was a silent, yet powerful promise, and I knew something was about to shift. That night, I slept with the first thread of hope since I moved in. It didn't fix everything, didn't heal everything, didn't bring my meds back, but it lit a flame that Lauren wouldn't be able to put out. My last thought was a simple surrender. Guide my steps, and I fell asleep with the sense that God was preparing the ground. Ground I couldn't see yet. But that would soon change everything. The next day started with a different energy in the house. Matthew opened the windows early, whistling while tidying up the living room. I watched from the doorway, my coffee cup trembling slightly in my hand. He seemed cheerful, saying we'd have some coworkers over. Lauren moved briskly through the room, straightening too many pillows. The smell of spices filled the air, trying to create a cozy atmosphere. But beneath it all, tension stretched like an invisible wire. While chopping vegetables, Lauren threw a quick glance at me. It wasn't outright hostility, it was surveillance, control. She wanted to make sure I stayed quiet, that I didn't ruin the good impression. Matthew walked past me and said, "Mom, tonight, let's make it great, okay?" I smiled, but he didn't see the effort behind that smile. He had already decided it would be a perfect evening, period. Only I knew about the storm creeping through the corners of the house. People started arriving around 7 in the evening. The doorbell rang, laughter echoed, hugs multiplied in the living room. Lauren welcomed each guest with rehearsed politeness, a magazine cover smile. She introduced me as the dear mom who came to live with us. The words sounded sweet, but her gaze was cutting. I felt out of place, but kept my composure. Maybe to show myself I was still capable of dignity. The table was set with care, full of colorful dishes and lit candles. Matthew chatted excitedly about work, while guests laughed loudly. I remained quiet, observing everything with sharp attention. I noticed Lauren correcting the tiniest details, constantly fixing napkins. She wanted to show total control of the house, of life, of me. And that made me stay alert, even while pretending to be natural. Something was about to happen. I could feel it. One of the guests introduced herself as Clara, a nurse. She had a warm smile and eyes that saw beyond words. We chatted a bit about high blood pressure, meds, health routines. As we talked, I noticed Lauren watching, her posture stiff. She seemed uncomfortable, restless, as if Clara had crossed into forbidden territory. Her presence shed light on truths Lauren wanted to keep hidden. And that detail sparked something inside me. As everyone was serving themselves, the dizziness hit me again, stronger. I discreetly held onto the table's edge to steady myself. Clara touched my arm and quietly asked, "Are you okay?" I nodded, but my breathing was shallow. The lack of medication was starting to take its toll. And I realized that night would reveal more than Lauren wanted. Much more. I went to the kitchen to get Clara some water, trying to walk slowly and steadily. The warm light lit up the counter and the neatly aligned jars. As I filled the glass, I felt an unease and almost instinctive call. My eyes landed on the rice jar, a large container with a plastic lid. Something inside me urged me to open it, no logical reason. I set the glass aside and slowly lifted the lid, and my breath caught. There, buried in the white rice, was one of my pill bottles, hidden like a dirty secret. For a moment, the world seemed to spin backward, too silent. I ran my fingers over the label, feeling the cold plastic, as if it were evidence of a crime. A shiver ran down my spine, waking every part of me. I had no idea where they were, would have never guessed this hiding spot. But now the truth was literally in my hands. The distant sound of voices from the living room felt like echoes from another house. I stood there alone, staring at the confirmation of everything I feared. I felt a mix of indignation and relief I wasn't crazy after all. Someone had done this on purpose, deliberately, with intent. I closed my eyes for a moment, breathing slowly so I wouldn't lose balance. The bottle felt heavier than it should. It was more than plastic. It was proof. I picked up the water glass, still with a trembling hand, and held the bottle too. Before returning to the living room, I looked around to see if anyone had noticed. The kitchen was silent, as if it held too many secrets. The shadows seemed to move with the candlelight from the table. I straightened up, squared my shoulders, cleared my throat. It was time to carry that truth forward, even if the whole night fell apart. When I entered the living room, I felt all eyes turn to me. Matthew smiled absent-mindedly, unaware of what I was holding. Lauren froze when she saw the bottle in my hand, a micro-expression that gave her away. I walked over to Clara and handed her the water. Then, I gave her the bottle. And I said, in a clear and steady voice, "These are my missing meds. I just found them." The silence that followed was immediate and deep, like a slice through the air. The candles seemed to flicker. Conversations died mid-sentence. Matthew frowned, confused, trying to connect the dots too fast. I just looked at him with the solid calm of someone who won't back down. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't fear, it was truth. And I knew that moment would crack open irreversible fractures. Fractures that would swallow every mask in that house. When I finished speaking, the whole room seemed to hold its breath. Clara took the bottle gently, examining the label like someone reading an accusation. Lauren remained still, her smile frozen, eyes too wide. The guests exchanged quick, uneasy glances, trying to understand the scene. I held my posture, hands clasped in front of me, steadier than I'd been in weeks. The silence hung over every object in the room. Not even the cutlery moved anymore. Clara held up the bottle and asked, "This was where?" "In the rice jar," I replied, my voice clear as glass. Some guests murmured, shocked, leaning in to see better. Matthew's eyes widened, looking first at me, then at Lauren. He waited for me to explain, but I never looked away from my daughter-in-law. I wanted her to speak first. I wanted to see what she would make up. The nurse turned the bottle between her fingers and shook her head. "The level's off. Someone tampered with this," she said quietly. Her words echoed across the table like a siren. Lauren tried to laugh, but her voice failed before it could form any sound. One guest put a hand over her mouth, shocked. Another just looked away, unsure where to hide. And I watched everything in calculated silence. When Matthew finally found his voice, it came out shaky. "Mom, what does this mean?" He looked lost, like a boy unsure whether to believe what he was seeing. I looked at him with a mix of tenderness and pain, not answering right away. I let the weight of the question fall on Lauren. Let the silence become an interrogation. It was the first time she didn't have control. Lauren took a deep breath, lifted her chin, and tried to recover her charm. "This must have been a mistake. Maybe it fell in there by accident," she said with a cracked smile. But her hands trembled, betraying a fear she couldn't hide anymore. One guest raised an eyebrow, outraged. Another murmured, "Fall into the rice?" Lauren's perfect polish was starting to crack before everyone, and each crack revealed more truth. Clara, still holding the bottle, stepped back. "Interrupting this medication is dangerous. Very dangerous." Her voice was firm, confident, now louder so everyone could hear. Matthew turned pale, staring at the bottle like it was a stick of dynamite. Lauren looked away, but it was too late. The mask had fallen, and nothing could be hidden again. The air in the room grew heavy, almost solid, after the nurse's revelation. Matthew looked at me as if trying to piece together something he never imagined. The candles flickered, casting restless shadows on the walls and across our faces. I held my shoulders firm, breathing slowly, feeling the ground beneath my feet. Lauren fidgeted with a napkin with nervous fingers, trying to appear calm. But her eyes revealed panic, pure, urgent, uncontrolled. And that said it all. Matthew stood up slowly, his chair scraping the floor with a tense screech. "Lauren, did you know about this?" he asked, still not looking at me. His voice was low, but sharp, like a thin blade. Lauren let out a short, desperate laugh, trying to pass it off as overreaction. "Babe, of course not. This is a misunderstanding." But no one reacted to her performance. Not even she believed what she was saying. The nurse took another step forward, now facing them both. This is not a misunderstanding. That medication doesn't just disappear by accident. Her firmness made Lauren shrink slightly. Matthew rubbed his face, trying to hide the trembling in his jaw. I could see the conflict growing inside him: loyalty, guilt, fear, guilt, growing inside him, loyalty. A storm he never expected to face, and now it weighed on his shoulders. A guest whispered, "This is serious, Matt." The words hit the room like a slap. Matthew blinked slowly, like he was waking up from a trance. He finally looked at me, not like a distracted son, but like a terrified man. "Mom, how long has this been happening?" My heart sped up, but I didn't look away. It was time for him to see. Before I could answer, Lauren stood up abruptly. Her chair scraped loudly, making everyone jump. She brought a hand to her face, trying to hide her despair. "This is cruel, Hilda. You've always treated me badly. Now you want to paint me as a monster?" The accusation was loaded with fake tears, but no one bought it. The guests watched her with visible discomfort, and Matthew, for the first time, didn't rush to defend her. She took a step back, stumbling in her haste. "I don't have to listen to this," she shouted, already heading toward the hallway. But the gesture erased nothing, it only confirmed everything. Matthew followed her with his eyes, completely dazed. Then he looked back at me, devastated. He finally understood that the truth had been in front of him for a long time. Clara held the bottle like a piece of evidence, not just medicine. She took a deep breath before speaking, looking directly at Matthew. "Stopping this medication can cause dizziness, fainting, arrhythmia. Even worse." Her words fell heavy, making the room even more tense. Lauren, standing in the hallway, bit her lip as if trying to hold back fake sobs. But her shoulders shook too much for it to be real sadness. It was fear pure, sharp, urgent. Matthew ran his hand through his hair, completely disoriented. He looked at Lauren like he was seeing a stranger in his own home. "This isn't normal. This isn't an accident," he muttered, almost voiceless. Clara continued, "This medication can't keep disappearing without intention." Each word from her peeled away another layer of Lauren's facade. The guests watched in absolute silence, some looking away. The living room had turned into an impromptu courtroom. Lauren laughed, a broken, nervous, unconvincing laugh. "Guys, you're overreacting." Sometimes Hilda mixes up her pills. She threw a quick glance at me, trying to belittle me right there. But her act lost all strength when Clara replied firmly, "She wrote down every dose. She knows exactly what she takes." Lauren swallowed hard, lost for a moment. And that moment was enough for the truth to shine. Matthew took a step toward me, as if seeking confirmation. "Mom, did she mess with this? Did she really do this?" His question came filled with pain and guilt. I felt the strength in my legs falter, but I stayed firm. I pointed to the bottle in the nurse's hands without taking my eyes off my son. The truth was there, it didn't need a speech. And he understood. The guests began to shift uncomfortably in their chairs. One of them whispered, "This is a crime." Matthew closed his eyes, absorbing every word, every silence in the room. Lauren pressed her lips together, breathing unevenly, looking for a way out. But the door to any excuse had already been locked by the facts. The perfect mask she wore for years was now shattered on the floor, and she knew there was no way to put it back together. Clara set the bottle on the table gently. "What happened here could have had serious consequences," she repeated. Her words echoed like a final verdict. Matthew turned to Lauren, now with eyes full of deep pain. The kind of pain only a betrayed son can feel. She looked away, unable to face him. And the truth, for the first time, stood exposed with no possible defense. Matthew was silent for long seconds, as if the ground had disappeared beneath him. He leaned on the table, taking a deep breath, trying to process what he was seeing. Lauren watched from a distance, eyes red, hoping he would defend her. But he didn't move toward her, not this time. The guests seemed suspended in air, waiting for his reaction. I just watched him, feeling my heart race. Something inside him was starting to break. He slowly turned to Lauren, his face filled with disbelief. "You hid her medication?" he asked, without raising his voice. His calm was more frightening than any scream. Lauren shook her head too quickly to be believable. "Of course not. You really think I would do that to your mother?" but the trembling in her jawline said otherwise. And Matthew saw it. He ran a hand over his face, as if trying to wake up from a nightmare. I saw you being cold to her. But this? His voice came out torn, like his throat was burning. Lauren, this could have put her life at risk. She tried to step closer, but he stepped back, a gesture that hurt more than any words. Don't touch me right now, he murmured, firm. And the silence sliced through the air. The guests slowly began to gather their plates, far too uncomfortable. Clara touched my shoulder and whispered, "It's okay now." He saw it. I took a deep breath, allowing that phrase to find a place inside me. For months I had screamed for help without making a sound and no one heard. But now the truth was speaking for itself. The truth had its own voice, and no one could ignore it anymore. Lauren wiped her tears quickly, trying to regain control. I just wanted a little peace in this house, she said, overly tearful. Matthew closed his eyes, breathing deeply, already tired of the manipulation. Peace? He repeated, looking around. What you did could have killed my mother. His words dropped like a stone, and Lauren collapsed. She ran to the bedroom, slamming the door shut. The guests looked at each other, unsure whether to stay or leave. Matthew remained standing, staring at the floor like he was searching for answers there. I watched him, feeling something between relief and deep sadness. The house was emotionally wrecked, but the truth was finally shining through. And I knew nothing would ever go back to the way it was. Nothing. Lauren stayed locked in the bedroom for a few minutes, leaving the whole house in suspense. Her muffled crying seeped through the door like tiny dramatic knives. The guests began saying their goodbyes quietly, slipping out almost on tiptoe. Matthew thanked them mechanically, barely lifting his eyes. I slowly gathered a few glasses, trying to give him space to breathe. But the atmosphere was so heavy that even the air seemed to move slower. Nothing in that house wore its old mask anymore. When the last person left, the bedroom door finally opened. Lauren emerged with a tear-streaked face, smudged mascara, and a trembling voice. "This is unfair, Matthew. You're attacking me," she said, hands over her chest. She walked toward him, but each step seemed choreographed to stir pity. "I do everything for this house. Everything," she continued, sobbing. It was a performance. I'd seen that theatrical look before, but it wouldn't work now. Matthew raised his eyes slowly, still stunned. "Lauren, no one's attacking you. The question is simple. Why were her meds hidden?" She shook her head, feigning outrage. "I don't know. Maybe your mom put them there and forgot." The sentence hit the room like a cold punch. I took a deep breath, trying not to show the impact. That attempt to paint me as confused was too cruel. "Lauren, please." Matthew's tone now was one of deep exhaustion. "You really think that's something my mom would do?" She looked away, but her mouth kept spewing empty excuses. I just wanted peace, Matthew. She doesn't like me." The manipulation was clear. Make herself the victim, even with proof in plain sight. Her old strategy. But its effect was wearing thin. Matthew stepped back then again. "I don't believe anything you say anymore." Lauren's eyes widened, feeling control slipping through her fingers. She tried to touch his arm, but he pulled away again. "Don't try to turn this on her. Not today." His voice was steady now, and that seemed to break Lauren inside. She brought her hands to her face, sobbing loudly, too loudly to be real. Then she ran back to the bedroom, slamming the door violently. This time no one followed her. The whole house stayed silent, as if waiting for my next move. Matthew remained in the living room, breathing deeply, completely defeated. And I knew this was the moment he needed me. A mother, not a victim. Matthew stayed quiet for a long time, staring at the floor. His shoulders trembled slightly, as if carrying too much weight. The room still echoed with traces of laughter that no longer belonged to the night. Slowly, he walked over to me, stopping right in front. I looked at him and saw the boy I had raised, and the man suffering now. His eyes were red, intense, asking for something he didn't know how to ask for. Then he knelt. "Mom, forgive me." His voice came out broken, almost unrecognizable. He gripped my hands tightly, as if afraid I'd disappear. "I didn't want to see. I didn't see anything that was happening." The trembling in his fingers released all the guilt that had built up for months, and that hit me harder than anything Lauren had said. It was my son coming back to me. I crouched slightly, leaning down to be closer to him. "Matthew, look at me." I said calmly. He lifted his face, and his tear-filled eyes said everything before words could. You never lost me, I added, touching his cheek. That gesture undid him completely. I saw his chest quiver. His pain was real, raw, defenseless. And there was nothing in me that wanted to punish him. He rested his forehead in my hands, breathing deeply, trying to compose himself. I should have protected you. I should have noticed. The guilt seeped from every word, but I held it with tenderness. Son, evil in disguise is hard to see, I whispered. But when the truth arrives, no one can escape it. He closed his eyes, absorbing every syllable. And he stayed there for a few seconds, just breathing with me. When he finally stood up, his eyes held a different expression. It wasn't confusion anymore, it was resolve. The resolve to change, to act, to never let that happen again. This won't happen again, Mom. I promise. I felt my chest loosen, like a belt had been unfastened. His promise had weight, truth, pain. And that was the beginning of something new. Matthew held my hands again before letting go slowly. I need to think. I need to get all of this straight in my head. I nodded. Asking nothing of him, he was already caring enough. He hugged me tightly, a hug full of remorse and old love. And in that embrace, I felt the son I raised fully return. But I also felt the house hadn't revealed everything yet. The night was far from over. In the days following the dinner, the house felt like an empty church. Lauren walked back and forth, packing small suitcases, then larger ones. She spoke on the phone in whispers, complaining about the injustice she was suffering. Matthew watched her from a distance, silent, neither confronting nor consoling. Their relationship seemed to have emptied overnight, and each silence between them said more than any argument. The truth had left its mark. On a gray morning, Lauren came downstairs with 2 suitcases and an accusatory expression. I'm staying at my parents' until you make up your mind, she announced. Matthew just nodded, arms crossed firmly. She shot me a hard, bitter look that had no effect. I was far too tired to absorb anyone else's poison. The door closed behind her with a muffled thud, and the silence that followed felt almost like relief. Matthew stood still for a few moments, staring at the closed door. His shoulders dropped as if he could finally breathe. He walked into the kitchen, pulled out a chair, and sat down like he was collapsing. Mom, she needs to think. So do I, he said, fidgeting with his fingers. I sat next to him without touching, just being there. Presence was enough. He didn't need more words in that moment. He was hurt, but awake. After a few minutes, he got up and started opening cupboards. He emptied them all, reorganized, cleaned, moved plates to new places, until he cleared an entire shelf and added colorful labels. These are for your meds, he said firmly. I watched in silence, a lump growing fast in my throat. It was the kind of care I hadn't seen since my husband was alive. It was the kind of care I hadn't seen since my husband was alive. And it moved me deeply. He took the recovered bottle and placed it at the center of the shelf. Then he turned to me with a shy, almost teenage smile. Mom, I want you to stay, at least until I figure all this out. His words carried both vulnerability and strength. I touched his arm gently, feeling his warm skin under my fingers. I'll stay, son. Not because you need me, but because we both do. And I saw immediate relief in his eyes. That night, the house felt lighter. No shouting, no complaints, no angry footsteps from Lauren pacing around. Matthew made a simple pasta, and we ate together like we used to years ago. He asked about my health, my bones, my daily routine. I answered everything calmly, savoring each gesture of care. It was a beginning, not perfect, not resolved, but a real one. A new beginning built on truth, finally seen. The first few weeks without Lauren were strangely peaceful. Matthew woke up early, made coffee, and left a mug just for me. He'd ask if I slept well, if I had taken all my meds. I watched it all in silence, a deep affection rekindling in my chest. He seemed to be relearning how to be a son, step by step, act by act. And every detail showed how hard he was trying to make things right, trying to rebuild what had nearly been destroyed. One day, he called me into the living room to show a spreadsheet on the computer. I organized your med schedule here, and I set reminders on my phone too. He spoke carefully, almost shyly, like someone afraid of overstepping. But I saw pride in his eyes, pride in being present. I touched his shoulder and said, "Thank you, my son." The word "my" shone brighter in that moment. And I saw his smile grow in a way I hadn't seen since his youth. Another day, we went grocery shopping together. He pushed the cart while I picked out fruit, commenting on colors and smells. It was a simple scene, but it felt like a movie of reclaimed time. Matthew picked up packages, read labels, asked if I preferred this brand or that one. I chuckled softly when he got too worried. "Son, I'm not made of glass," I teased. He laughed too, a clean, honest laugh. At night, he started cooking with me in the kitchen. He chopped crooked veggies, burned himself on steam, spilled too much salt, but he was there fully, presently, willingly. Every mistake became a laugh, every success a small triumph. And at the end, he'd always eat my dish and say, "No one cooks like you." I pretended not to get emotional, but my hands always gave me away. It was good to have my son back. One Saturday, he showed up with a small box. "Got you a new pill organizer, it's easier to open." His care was so specific, so thoughtful, it made me take a deep breath. "You're overdoing it," I muttered, trying to hide the emotion. "No, I'm not," he said, serious. "I should have done this a long time ago." And his eyes said everything words couldn't. Each day beside him reminded me that dignity isn't lost, it's reclaimed. I didn't need luxury or formal apologies. I just needed presence, respect, truth. And Matthew was giving me all of that with real sincerity. There was still pain, of course, but there was healing too slow, steady, honest. He was learning how to be a true son, and I was learning how to receive care without fear. As the weeks passed, the memory of Lauren stopped being an open wound. It became just a bitter memory, like a bad-tasting medicine that had done its job. Matthew rarely mentioned her, and when he did, it was with a tired sigh. There was no hatred, just disappointment, heavy, deep, honest. I even surprised myself when I realized I didn't feel resentment. The pain was there, yes, but it hadn't turned into poison. My faith wouldn't allow it. Some nights, while the house slept, I'd sit in the armchair in the living room. I'd watch the soft lamplight reflect on the floor and think of Lauren, not as the woman who hid my medication, but as someone lost within herself. Only someone very empty wishes suffering on someone who just wants peace, I repeated to myself. And I realized compassion requires strength more than any confrontation. I forgave her, even without hearing an apology. My heart needed that. Matthew, little by little, began to rebuild his own routine. He'd go to work, come home, ask how my day went. Sometimes he'd invite me to walk in the garden or watch an old movie with him. It was a simple relationship, but filled with new meaning. He was learning to care for me the way I'd cared for him all those years. And that was the true restoration I never imagined I'd see. A justice that came through change, not punishment. With every prayer, I included Lauren's name in my words. Not because she deserved it, but because I deserved peace. I asked God to heal whatever had broken inside her, to give her back empathy, clarity, light. I didn't want her to suffer what she made me suffer. I wished only that she'd never hurt anyone like that again. Healing is sometimes bigger than the wound. On calmer days, Matthew was surprised by my serenity. "Mom, you're not angry at her?" he asked one day while helping with my blanket. I smiled slowly, feeling the weight of the wisdom age had given me. "Anger is a shadow, son. And I need light." He nodded, touched as if that phrase opened something inside him. It was beautiful to see him understand things he once ignored. Things only pain can teach. Even now, when I think back to the night of the dinner, I get a slight shiver, not a fear of gratitude, because the truth came out in a way no one could erase. And God, with his silent hand, put every piece back in its place. I regained my dignity, my strength, my space, and Lauren. Well, she was left with her own conscience. Sometimes, that's punishment enough. If you've made it this far, you already know the darkest corners of this story. You know my pain, my fall, my discovery, my restoration. You know that dignity isn't returned by human hands, it's reaffirmed by God. And it was He who brought light when evil tried to hide in the corners of my home. Today, my meds are organized, my health is stable, my soul is at peace. And Matthew, my son, found his way back to true love. We both were reborn, a little. Telling this story isn't easy. It's like opening a door that still creaks, still hurts, still scares. But it's also like letting the sun in after a long night. If I chose to share this, it's so other mothers know, you are not alone. Even when they call you fragile, old, dramatic, God sees what they do to you. And in the right time, He reveals it all even what they try to hide, even what they bury inside rice jars. If this story touched your heart, I want to ask you something simple. Leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from. I love imagining faces and places. Subscribe to the channel to receive more stories like mine, stories of courage and truth. Leave a like to help this message reach more people who need to hear it. And share it if you know someone going through something similar. Sometimes a story saves a tired soul. Sometimes just knowing someone understands is already healing.